Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today it's all about freehanding. What is it? How do you do it? How do you get better at it? And of course, the understanding that it is indeed a fundamental skill to have in any form of art. To talk you through this process, I'm using a video that I've recently uploaded to Patreon. I supply many different reference photos along with line drawings, and the video explains what to do with those photos and how to create a freehand drawing from your own guides. That video is on the beginner and basics tier, and it is also on the pencils and pastels tier. Both of these are only $5 a month, so if you do fancy looking at those, just pop along. I'll leave a link below. Before we move on to the video, let's briefly look at what freehanding is and its definition. According to the internet, the definition of freehanding is anything that is done by hand without mechanical aids or measuring tools. So basically, we're talking about hand-to-eye coordination here and the ability to draw what you see. So even if you draw a very basic grid and freehand within that grid, it is not true freehanding. That is, unless you draw your own grid. And that's what we're about to do in this video. So let's make a start. The first thing I like to do is actually draw a movement guide. The movement guide tells me about the flow of the photo and it helps me position it right on the page. I don't always draw the movement guide on my freehand drawing, however sometimes it does form part of it, and in this case with this toucan bird it seemed like a good grid line to pop in. You can see the difference here between the movement guide that's in green and the freehand guide, which is in orange. Once I've plotted the movement guide in, I move straight onto the freehand guide, and for this toucan bird, circles seem to fit the bird quite well in terms of overlaying shapes over the photo. And you can see, other than the branch, there are 3 circles, one for the eye, one for the body, and the final one that incorporates the shape of the beak. As we are also freehanding the grid, we must bear in mind that we might not actually draw the grid exactly the same as we have done over the photo. The aim is to just get it as close as we possibly can. Freehanding involves lots of erasing as we go, and in order to relax while you're freehanding, we must let go of the idea of mistakes. Each line or shape in our drawing leads us to a better line or shape overall, and we need to have a process of refining as we go. And this process must be done lightly on the paper. It's often done through a series of lines on the paper rather than a single one. So sketching over drawing, and by maintaining a light touch on the paper with light pressure, we preserve the tooth of the paper, meaning that it's not going to cause us any problems when we actually start drawing. Freehanding straight onto your art paper though can cause some problems later on, and because of this I often actually freehand on a piece of tracing paper. I can then transfer that line drawing onto my art paper using the usual transfer methods. So once we've drawn the grid, it's time to start on drawing the bird. And this is the time where we now start to look at relationships and angles across the photo. At this point, I'm still working on a rough outline here. My focus is on getting the angles right, so I don't need to worry about all of the details on the outer edge. And it's worth considering at this point that I may be erasing some of these lines, so there is no need to go overboard with any details. You can of course go back in later to put them in. Personally, I don't bother. I'm going to be drawing it in colour pencil anyway, so I revert to freehanding with a colour pencil to do those details. There are three main elements in this form of freehanding: angles, spacing and distance, and relationships from one part of the photo to another. Looking at angles, we can decide where we are putting a mark on the paper and what direction that line is going in. We will also need to know what the next angle is and the next angle. So for a moment, imagine drawing a circle by using angles. This is exactly what we're doing when we're looking at our reference photo. But we are also looking at where we are placing those angles, and we have a word to describe this, which is composition. We can also ask some further questions, such as what is the distance between the angle we are drawing and the next angle, or what is the distance between the angles we are drawing now compared to other angles within the same photo, which is essentially looking at the relationships. So putting all of this together then, here you can see I'm just about to draw the leg in, and I'm taking note of how thick the leg is by looking at the distances between the two outer edges. I'm also looking at each outer edge and deciding what angle they are. Just knowing the angle is not enough. We need to know where we're going to place that angle. So how I do that is I take that angle further up and see where it sits at the top of the beak and the eye position. Alternatively, you can also look at the drawing guide and see if that angle crosses any of the guides, which will help us place each side of the leg. But this only informs me of one direction of the leg. So I will find the fattest part of the leg, and then I can carry it across the photo to see where it meets any lines vertically. Sometimes we don't have a clear vertical or horizontal line to work with, and we may need to go diagonally to another part of the photograph to place things. The important thing to note here is every photo is different, so I can't tell you where the other angles and relationships are on the photo that you're particularly drawing. But once you understand and learn this technique, it will come naturally. So just to summarise then, we start with a series of shapes that may or may not involve a sense of movement in the photo that you're drawing. We can either trace that guide onto our art paper, or we can freehand it. Using that guide and that homemade grid, we can start to plot in some of the main features of our reference photo. And we do that by looking at the spacing. Where does that fit in between the guides that we have drawn? As well as spacing, we then look at the angles of where those marks are. And we compare those angles with other angles across the reference photo. If you freehanded your grid, you're going to have to prioritise drawing your photo accurately over and above the grid that you've drawn. In other words, you must be prepared to move your grid as you are drawing. So by drawing something in, comparing it to another part of the photo, comparing it to the grid, you will eventually get an accurate line drawing on your paper. But it's going to take a layering system of putting lines in and taking lines out. And be prepared to have a steep learning curve on this. It is going to take you a little while to learn. On average, a freehand drawing will take me anywhere between 5 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on the complexity of the reference photo. But learning this technique will take a lot longer. In fact, it takes me about 10 times longer to describe what I'm doing as I'm doing it. If you persevere through the learning curve, you are going to discover some things about your drawing. You're going to discover some of the natural anomalies that happens between your hand and your brain. For example, mine is I draw pictures too long. I've known about this issue for quite a long time now, and over the years I have found ways to combat it. And while I'm drawing, I pay attention to the fact I will draw horizontal lines a lot longer than they should be. So what I do is I adjust and I do them shorter. It's a real advantage to know about those anomalies in your drawing. The knowledge enables you to correct as you go and makes the process of freehanding a lot easier. I'm going to leave you with the rest of the video now, but if you have any questions, just pop them down below and I'll do my best to answer them if indeed I know the answer. Otherwise, I hope you found this video useful. Give me a thumbs up, perhaps subscribe and help me grow. See you on the next video. Bye for now. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button to be notified of any future videos. If you want longer real-time tutorials, then pop over to my Patreon channel and the link is in the description below. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next video, and bye for now.